over last year. That's on top of last year's 14% increase over 2021. It's affected what some consumers are buying for Halloween, and many are turning to budget brands, store brands, or just buying fewer bags to hand out to trick-or-treaters. Weather conditions are being blamed for skyrocketing cocoa prices. West Africa has seen some heavy rains, which has limited production. Expected dry conditions into the spring are expected to keep prices high well into 2024. And when it comes to pricey places on the list, U.S. News and World Report ranks the most expensive cities. San Diego takes the top spot, followed by Los Angeles. Then Honolulu, Miami ranks fourth, with Santa Barbara rounding out the top 5. In all, 12 of the top 25 priciest U.S. cities to live are in California.
John Wakem's wife, Roberta. Thatcher herself would have been injured, if not for the fact that she was delayed from using the bathroom, which sustained severe damages. The IRA claimed responsibility the next day and promised to try again. Its statement read, "Mrs. Thatcher will now realise that Britain cannot occupy our country and torture our prisoners and shoot our people in their own streets and get away with it."
Who just tried to hire one of our sources who's a Law Zeta member, who at the time, that was one of the most hyper-violent cartels in Mexico. And they're trying to assassinate a Saudi ambassador in Washington, D.C. My analyst identified that individual assigned to that DEA strike force. It was one of the biggest terrorism cases in this country. So when you hear me say that the cartels are major players in this, you have to remember, Sinaloa was operating in 54 countries, Cartel Jalisco New Generation in at least 48 that we know of. But from there, the synergy between what we call tier 1 gangs, major gangs that impact multiple regions of our country, work with juveniles all over this country and have really commit multiple acts of violence domestically. They also work with our local street gangs. So the logistics to get these people into the country, the gatekeepers become the cartels. The problem is that the American people aren't told. And this is the job of the United States intelligence agencies. This is the job of the Homeland Security enterprise. And from the cartel's perspective, the reason this is so important is that we in the West, we consider Middle East terrorist organizations here. We put them above, gangs, cartels, all of this because of what happened to us from 9/11. But when you look at it from the cartel's perspective, who have control of the logistics into our country, from their perspective, they're in charge. And in their backyard, they are in charge. Make no doubt about it. There's not a terrorist organization in the world that's more powerful than them in their own backyard. So you have to collaborate with them. You have to pay the piece or the tax and the money to get into this country. And we see it play out all along. Look, let's talk about the Chinese like Michael just talked about. He's absolutely right. The Zetas, formerly known as Zetas, now known as Cartel del Noreste, they're moving about 35 Chinese at a time, almost every night, into Fronton. Right before they cross, what do they make them do? Drop their passports, because they know as soon as they cross and turn themselves into Border Patrol, they have no idea who they really are. What does that do? That holds up the line, and then from there, the cartel can move deadly drugs into the country and a lot of munitions southbound.
And Jason, you mentioned chaos. Tampa police say it happened just before 3 a.m. this morning. Police say incidents started with a fight between two groups. One man died at the scene and the second died at a local hospital. It's reported that one person turned himself in. In the Israel-Hamas war, airstrikes hit northern Gaza as Israel continues to bombard the enclave. Israeli warplanes carrying out airstrikes early this morning near Gaza's largest hospital. Israel says Gaza's militant Hamas rulers have a command post under the hospital without providing much evidence. The strikes came a day after Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu announced a second stage in Israel's war on Hamas. Tanks and infantry pushed into Gaza over the weekend in what officials described as a widening ground offensive as Israel pounded the territory from air, land, and sea. The bombardment, described by Gaza residents as the most intense of the war, knocked out most communications in the territory late Friday, largely cutting off the besieged enclave's 2.3 million people from the world. Communications were restored to many people in Gaza early this morning. It was described as a widening ground offensive as Israel pounded the territory from air, land, and sea. The bombardment, described by Gaza residents as the most intense of the war, knocked out most communications in the territory late Friday, largely cutting off the besieged enclave's 2.3 million people from the world. Communications were restored to many people in Gaza early this morning. And today, an International Committee of Red Cross Aid Convoy arrived at the Nasser Hospital in southern Gaza. The ICRC says that 10 staff members, including a surgery team, crossed into Gaza. In a post on Facebook, the Palestinian Red Crescent confirmed they have received the 10 trucks of aid, which are filled with food, medicine, and other medical supplies. In sad news,
120. And there are more variables to consider, including foreign citizens, several of whom are American.
From talking to people in Gaza and abroad, is that there is not a direct ongoing contact between the political wing of Hamas and the military wing of Hamas. I'm not even sure, I can't say that within the military wing of Hamas, on the ground in Gaza or under the ground in Gaza, there's a direct line of command, and that Hamas has control of all the 220 hostages. The most important lesson that I've learned from my experience in negotiating is that the more streamlined the negotiation channel is, the better. The more direct it is, the better. When there are third parties involved, it complicates it because those third parties have their own interest, they have their own way of working, of communicating.
For now, Qatar and Egypt are serving as the primary interlocutors. Their ability to get 4 hostages out so far has prompted the White House to request that Israel delay sending troops into Gaza. That has divided some in this country who want to see Hamas removed as soon as possible.
The moral dilemma and the weight of the hostages being there is being heard more and more as what should be the primary directive of the government, and I think that explains the delay in the military incursion into Gaza, the desire to do everything possible to bring out as many people as possible without the military incursion happening first.
Now, the Israeli government says it is going to do everything it can to get these people out alive and home safely, but there is no doubt that with increased military action in both the south and the north, they are facing a huge dilemma as the clock is ticking. In Jerusalem, I'm Ryan Thompson for Newsnet.
Ryan, thank you. Here in the U.S., the United Auto Workers Union.
Iran's foreign minister called on Israel to stop its air attacks on Gaza and warned the war might expand to other parts of the Middle East.
Thank you very much. Goodbye. They still haven't given him an explanation or a reason why. He hasn't told anyone publicly. But with that said, Tucker was well prepared for this moment. He'd been let go from the other 2 major networks, MSNBC and CNN. But aside from that, he had a lot of mentors in his life that basically told him, one of them being Larry King, another being Roger Ailes, Bill O'Reilly, who had told him, and even his own father, who had told him basically, every job in television is a temporary job. You're totally replaceable. Don't get a big head about this. Don't think you're God just because you're on TV and you have all this power. And he really carried that with him and has carried that with him his whole life. I saw that personally being around him. I saw the lengths he goes to humble himself and, certain rituals he even has to remind himself that he's not God. I think that a lot of people working in cable TV didn't get that memo and don't understand that they're just as replaceable as Tucker. Tucker's not replaceable, but the network will see you as replaceable. Right. And if they'll do it to their number 1 star, they'll do it to anyone.
Now, Tucker has been doing this live streaming on, X, formerly known as Twitter, blah, blah, blah. I think Elon Musk said something to the effect of Tucker's live streams have brought in more viewers than the population of the United States. Can you speak on that? Is that accurate?
Yeah, well, according to the numbers, and that's just per video, his interview with Javier Milei, the guy who's running for president of Argentina, got, at last I checked, 420 million views, which is more than the population of the United States. He's had some other ones that have gone higher than 330 million. Fox hasn't really recovered their viewers from Tucker. They bounced back slightly when they reshuffled their primetime lineup, but there's certainly millions of people who were there for Tucker, or at least were holding on to the network because they allowed Tucker to speak, who haven't come back.
You know, when you make a sloppy decision like they did to let him go when he was speaking the truth, I guess dwindling ratings is what they deserve.
Should be expected.
Yeah. So what do you see with him moving forth? Is he just going to continue on X? Is he going to formulate his own station? What do you think's in the works?
So he's still under contract with Fox, and he has said to them, you know, keep your money and just let me be free, and they won't do that. So they're still paying him a salary, his usual salary every week, to not have a show, thinking they have the ability to keep him silent. From what I understand, the reason why he's on X is that Fox had failed to include Twitter X in their non-competes, which is why he's able to be there. But I know that this has been reported before that they're raising money for their own media company. The last time Tucker was fired from a cable news channel was CNN, and during that time he started the Daily Caller with his college roommate and best friend Neil Patel. So now I believe Neil and him are raising money for another venture, but it's up in the air about how they're going to be able to launch that while he's still under contract. His contract expires 1 month after the next presidential election, conveniently, December 2024. But when they're able to get that off the ground, Tucker's executive producer tells me that people can expect to see a lot more Tucker than they ever did on Fox. So that will be, good news for his audience.
Well, great news for X too. I'm sure they'll rake in the millions as far as viewership goes. Well, thank you so much, Chadwick Moore, for being on the program.
Thanks, Chadwick.
Of course, thank you so much.
Ah, nice. Brand new sidewalk. But from this brand new sidewalk, I can't get to that black pole right there, which also takes you into Fourth Ward Park. No wheelchair access. What a bummer. Old Fourth Ward Park. Not sure what the name of that street is, but that takes you over into the where the playground, the bathrooms, the water park. And this over here takes you over here back towards the other side, part of Fourth Ward Park there. I mean, there is no way of getting from that sidewalk over here to this one. What the hell were y'all thinking? Apparently not thinking. 2023. And I still can't get from here to over there. What's up with that, huh? Got a ramp there, and ain't no ramp here at all. About that intersection, I don't know, 7, 8 years. When will they put that ramp in? That's the big question. Yes, I shaved. What kind of a moron would leave this right here in front of the button?